finally, you went there,
you
saw, you kicked ass, you were in Peru. What's going on? Give us some news.
Okay, so you guys know that the election hadn't been called officially by the JNE, which is the electoral, the electoral organization in Peru that oversees the election, and they needed to be the ones to call the election, and they finally did. Pedro Castillo has been fully recognized as the president of Peru, and Keiko Fujimori's whole all her case was thrown out. They didn't find any evidence of the things she was alleging, and so he's the president now. And yesterday when I was here with my family, they were like, "Oh, they're gonna get rid of him," because it's something that happens, obviously in the global South, and also because he is like the first leftist candidate in a generation because of everything, like I said, that's happened with the Shining Path. The article I have should be released now that we have a decision. It's going to go through every single thing, including the history and why this win is so important to the global South. And it's crazy to me that this happened, because it's happening at a very tumultuous time when we have Bolivia, who just got, the people just regained control, a more leftist government as well. Then you have Chile that is up for an election with a leftist candidate coming up. You have Bolsonaro, who is highly unpopular in Brazil, and Lula coming up, rating really high in the polls. You have Nicaragua celebrating the Sandinistas revolution, 42 years. You have like Cuba, what's going on right now with we're trying to coup. We just had the coup in Haiti. So all of this is happening in the global South, and I think the lithium and the fourth industrial revolution, as we had Whitney Webb on, is going to play a huge role into how Castillo does, and he's going to face staunch opposition. So just anything to say before I get into it?
Yeah, I just want to say that, people, ladies and gentlemen, I also want to point out that this is leftist, economic leftist candidates, all right? So when we say economics, we say real left. In other words, when people go, "Oh, Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, they're left of Donald Trump," like, no, they might be on some social issues. They might at least claim to be. But when it comes to economics, they're not left. And it's really important to point that out, because this is really going to do great for poor people there, for the miners, for the workers, for labor, for the indigenous people, whatnot. It's going to give them extra resources, which is really, really important. So I just want to kind of point that out before we get going. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go through my tweet thread. Pedro Castillo has now officially been proclaimed president of Peru as Keiko Fujimori's case was thrown out. This is a very proud moment for fellow Peruvians. It doesn't end there. Castillo will face staunch opposition from the establishment. The fear of the coup is still there, but we must continue exposing the empire at every turn to avoid intervention, because it's coming. But even the OAS could not finagle better a way to say this election was unfair. That is how clear the election was. And we're going to look right now at the JNE, who said this is from their official account. According to our Article 323 of the LOE, the General Proclamation Act contains relevant information by the OMPE, the Oficina Nacional de Procesos Electorales, and the GEE after the observations on the electoral records, voting challenges, and nullities have been resolved. So they resolved all of that, all the things that were out there. The next tweet that I'm going to go over is the official, the latest, right? The JNE, in compliance with the Constitution of Peru and the law, proclaimed Jose Pedro Castillo Terrones as president of the Republic on Monday, yesterday, and as first vice president of the Republic, Dina Ercilia Boluarte Segarra, both from Peru Libre National Political Party. So they are the ones. Peru Libre now has more people in government than it did before. However, combined, the other parties could oppose them. So it's official as it gets. And just a reminder that Peru will be having a new constitution. This was the intention of Pedro Castillo, getting rid of the influence of Fujimorismo in the last constitution. And one of the things that Peruvians were saying, Peruvians that are happy with Castillo's win, that he should surround himself with his friends and actually maybe decentralize Peru, because, everything happens in Lima, but he's not really safe there. And when I say this, I'm not exaggerating. He really isn't. He's not safe. So it would be great if he would start decentralizing a little bit and doing things in his native area of Cajamarca and kind of like decentralizing the power. Because again, we saw with what happened with Evo Morales, you got to have your people by you. And I think he should focus on the military as well. Evo Morales also was congratulating Pedro Castillo. Now, Evo Morales, more than any other leader, is very comparable to Pedro Castillo, both from the peasant class, right? The more Andean region. Both came up from nothing. They were extremely working class, and their wins were unexpected, and they were elected by a vast majority of indigenous people of Peru who have been suffering the most. So these two have been speaking to each other, and he said, finally, the JNE proclaimed our brother Pedro Castillo as president of Peru. It is a triumph of dignity and unity for the poor people over neoliberalism. Pedro will show how you govern with the people and with the people that are most marginalized and sacrificed. So that's from Evo Morales himself. And let's just watch this video. I thought this independent news source did a pretty decent job on summing it up, and we can hear a little bit of it. It ends at 2:35. We'll cut it off there.
Let's move on now. After a long, lengthy battle over election results, Peru's electoral authority has finally named socialist Pedro Castillo as the country's next president. Castillo has won the election by a margin of nearly 44,000 votes, beating his right-wing rival Keiko Fujimori in the third bid for the presidency. Peru's election authority announced its verdict after reviewing claims of electoral fraud by Fujimori. The official result had been delayed by appeals from Fujimori, which were aimed at repealing some ballots over fraud accusations against Castillo.
El señor presidente del Jurado Nacional de Elecciones proclamará los resultados de la segunda elección presidencial realizada el domingo 6 de junio de 2021.
Now, before the Monday night announcement, Fujimori said that she would accept the result as she is bound by law to recognize the commission's ruling.
I'm going to recognize the results because it is what the law and the constitution that I've sworn to defend mandates. The truth is going to come out anyway. We are all going to work together to re-establish legitimacy in our country. Now it is our turn to face a new stage together, which will be very difficult because communism will not come to power to let it go. They want to impose a new constitution. I am totally sure that we Peruvians will not allow Pedro Castillo and Vladimir Cerrón to turn Peru into Cuba or Venezuela.
Castillo is set to take the office on July 28th for a 5-year term as leader of the world's second largest copper-producing nation. In his first comments as president-elect, he called for national unity and urged his political rival to not put any more obstacles.
Okay.
Does Keiko Fujimori got to go to jail, fam, now, fam?
Rural teacher turned political novice Pedro Castillo has pledged to redraft the constitution and nationalize Peru's lucrative mining.
Okay. Yeah, she's supposed to go to jail, but she's got these lawyers. She's got these accusations still. So technically, she's still in danger. And there's actually looking into something else right now. There is a cell phone conversation that is potentially incriminating her for more corruption. So they're looking into that now. But I wanted to point out what she said. She said she is bound by the Constitution to recognize him to recognize, that she lost, but she still refuses to kind of say that he won. Like he's the president, but she won't say he won. And she's obviously her and her party, Fuerza Popular, are going to oppose any attempt to redraft a constitution. And this constitution, like I said before, is the constitution that remained from Fujimori himself. So obviously they don't want to change that. He plans to nationalize certain industries, bring back more of the working class power, get rid of some of these foreigners that have nothing to do with Peru, no more rich, poor people in a rich country, that sort of thing. And so he's going to, like I said, face staunch opposition. She mentioned Venezuela and Cuba, which is extremely telling right now, especially with what's happening in Cuba. So honestly, that scares me because I see that happening, right? I don't think the West is going to allow somebody that is going to threaten the a neoliberal stronghold that was Peru, because Peru was under neoliberalism now for decades, right? Yeah. And so now with they mentioned copper, but there's also lithium. Yeah. There's also gold. There's a lot of
nickel. There's a lot of nickel. I heard there too.
Yeah. So it's really like, if I don't think they're just gonna let this go. So it's worth keeping an eye on it. But for now, it is a victory for a lot of people who are very poor, who literally would not leave until he was called president. A lot of people from the regions, and we just have some pictures I wanted to show. His triumph. He spoke and let everybody know, like you guys heard, that this was about the people, the Peruvian people. I forgot to put in his Twitter, but basically it says the same thing you guys heard. So so there you go, fans.
Well, first off the bat, I want to make sure that we get one of those hats for Oz, because Oz really needs one of those white Pedro Castillo hats with the overalls. I think he can rock it like nobody's business. But secondly, let me tell you something. What's really concerning to me when I talk to a lot of conservatives, and the reason why it's concerning to me is that because, when we're able to manufacture consent as a nation to do the things as far as regime change, like regime change, it gets nerve-wracking. And I hear a lot of people, when I had that debate with Josh Bernstein, he said, oh, and this country's trying to nationalize this like it's a bad thing.
Right.
Pedro Castillo said straight up front, he's going to nationalize his natural resources, that lithium, that gold, that nickel, that copper, all that stuff. He's going to nationalize that. And as we know, fam, you just said it plain and simple, the United States war machine, the imperialism, the military-industrial complex, the elites, the predator class, whatever you want to call them, they're not going to sit down and take this lightly. So I am very surprised that they pushed this through, but it ain't over. You got 5 years that they're going to be jockeying to get this guy out. And with a character like Keiko Fujimori there and her family, the dynasty, we have to hold our breath every day. And I think it's also something great that you pointed out as well, is that all the centralized power in Lima is literally forces against him. A plan to decentralize and decentralize fast, will be very, very necessary for him to stay in power. And also the relationship with the military is going to be key. Because the one thing that Nicolas Maduro has been able to do, and the one thing that Cuba has been able to do, is make sure that their leadership, their leftist socialist governments, have very close, strong ties to the military. So as long as he has those ties to the military, where we saw Evo Morales, who did not have those ties to the military, he got nationally just spanked down. So these are things we have to pay attention to, keep our eye on, and continue to watch, because even though Castillo has been crowned today, it is not the end of this story. It is only just begun.
Right. Yeah, and another thing I just want to point out real quick is that this is unprecedented in Peru. He's Peru's fourth president to date. I mean, this guy was virtually unknown. He was a teacher. His parents did not read or write. He comes from like straight up like poverty, and he wasn't even popular in the beginning. So the fact that he's president just shows you that if you have fair elections, right, and if you have a straight system where it's very transparent and it's hard. I mean, there's some things I would tweak, right? But overall, like the elections, the way I saw them, they're extremely like see-through paper ballots, and they're counted. They should be counted publicly, but they're still, counted. They have a chain of custody as to when the trucks deliver and what, and they have like, Keiko was claiming that people, there were fake poll workers that weren't there, and if that had been true, she would have found them. But none of these people came forward because it is that tight. So if you have a fair system, you can elect somebody like that, somebody that represents the people. But if you have the system we have, because people's ad nauseum, right? Oh, they were just like, Trump. They just, no, we don't have a fair election system here. So anybody could question the elections here. That's the problem, because we don't have the same system that Peru has. So miss me with your comparisons to Trump, because it is a completely different election system. And I'm not going to get tired of saying that, because I've seen very prominent journalists do that. And it really irks the hell out of me, because you don't understand elections. They're two different countries with two different type of systems. 3 to 5 minutes to vote in and out. We have hours, 3 to 7 hours that people have waited in line to vote here. And there's no chain of custody. So and they don't have absentee ballots. They don't have vote by mail. They have ID, and it's compulsory voting, or you get fined. They have 1 day. They don't have a month to vote. Like, it is, by our standards in America, it would be right wing.
Yeah.
So
I was just imagining like a drop box in the middle of the Amazon over there, like, right. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody's trying to go put their mail-in ballot in the drop box, and there's a freaking python anaconda around the shit like that, watching the drop box. But I mean,
the piranhas,
the piranhas before you're trying to walk through the water to vote for Pedro Castillo. Can't do it. And fam, I'm glad you're writing that article and pointing that out, because there are a lot of things. And we, as election integrity activists, we can sit here and say, there's some things we would like to improve, but far better system, a more transparent system, a system that is less conducive to fraud than the United States. We're supposed to be America, land of the free, home of the brave. And yet our systems are shite. And here's the situation. And it was funny because I was on Crosstalk this morning. We'll be airing tomorrow. But the last thing that I didn't get my last say in there, but Lionel was on with me. He started bringing up elections and stuff, because they realized we were talking about what do we do to end this cold civil war? What should we do? Now we're looking at not just the person who disagrees with us as somebody who disagrees with us. Now that person's a domestic terrorist. You know what I'm saying? And the media is hyping up all this stuff. But the conclusion at the very end was, not only do we have to have uncomfortable conversations and get comfortable with them at the Thanksgiving Day table, but we also need to fix our elections, period, so that people really understand and get the representative government they want, just like they hopefully can maintain in Peru. So.
Right. Peru's greatest threat isn't unfair elections. It's the West. Our greatest threat is our own government. Like we will never elect somebody like Pedro Castillo remotely to the left economically like that ever until we fix our elections. And we will never fix our elections if we pretend that the state agencies aren't in control here. We don't have a say, and people need to come to terms with that. So that's what I wanted to say.
I think you need to understand there is a threat. It's China. China, China, China.